My son kept saying someone sat on his bed every night. I didn't believe him, until the night I stayed with him. I felt the bed sink. I heard it whisper. And when I grabbed my son and ran outside, something was still watching us from his window. He wasn't imagining it. And he's still not gone. I used to think I understood the house I lived in. A modest, two-story home built sometime in the late 1990s, nothing remarkable, nothing haunted, nothing flawed except for the occasional creak in the floorboards or the whisper of wind that slipped through the thin windowpanes. My wife, Emily, always said houses made noises the way old people did, you don't worry until the noises stop. But lately, the noises hadn't stopped. They had changed. It began with Jacob's whispers. Not the ordinary nighttime mutterings of a child dreaming, but soft, trembling pleas carried down the hallway to our bedroom, pleas that made me sit upright in bed, heart pounding even before I understood the words. Dad. Dad, he's here again. The first time, I chalked it up to a nightmare. Kids dream. Kids get scared. Kids imagine things in dark corners. And in my frustration of being woken up past midnight on a work night, I did what I thought any reasonable parent would do, walked him back to his room, tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and told him everything would be all right. The man sits on the edge, he whispered. Right where your feet are. I gave a tired smile. There's no man here, buddy. But his eyes. God, his eyes. Wide, wet, and hollow, as if he'd just witnessed something no child should ever see. I brushed off the chill that ran up my spine. The next night, it happened again. And the next. Emily suggested talking to a child therapist. I suggested fewer scary cartoons. But neither explanation made sense, because Jacob had stopped watching anything spooky long before this started. And he wasn't a liar. He wasn't dramatic. He certainly wasn't the type of kid to keep a story going out of stubborn imagination. On the seventh night, yes, a full week of these disturbances, I sat him down at breakfast and asked him calmly, "Why do you think someone is sitting on your bed?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, he simply lifted his spoon, eyes fixed on the cereal swirling in his bowl. When he finally looked at me, his expression was exhausted, defeated, almost angry. Because I feel him, Dad. I remember the way he said it, not scared, not confused. Certain. I told him I would stay with him that night. He nodded silently, like he'd been waiting, begging, for me to volunteer. Emily wasn't thrilled about the idea. She had a night shift at the hospital and insisted he just needed sleep training, maybe a stricter bedtime routine. But even she couldn't deny something unusual was happening. She left around 8, kissed Jacob's forehead, kissed mine, and whispered, "Don't make this into something it isn't." After she left, the house felt strangely quiet, as if the walls' usual groans had hushed themselves to listen. By 9, Jacob was asleep, and I sat beside him, the dim yellow glow of the nightlight casting long shadows across the room. The air was still, unnaturally so. A complete absence of movement. No breeze, no settling of furniture, no hum from the AC. Stillness like a held breath. I kept telling myself I would prove it was all in his head. Just one uneventful night, and this nightmare of his would end. But as midnight approached, something began to shift in the air. Not a sound. Not a movement. A weight. A pressure on the mattress at the foot of the bed. Slow. Gradual. As if something were lowering itself into a seated position. I froze. I stared. Nothing was there. But the mattress dipped beneath an invisible presence. My breath caught in my throat. The air turned cold enough for goosebumps to rise along my arms. Jacob stirred in his sleep, clutching the blankets with sudden urgency, his small fingers trembling. And then, a whisper. Not from Jacob. Not from me. A breathy, deliberate exhale inches from my feet. That was when the truth settled into my bones. Something else was in that room with us. Something unseen. Something that sat. Jacob hadn't been imagining anything. The weight grew heavier. The air grew colder. And I did not yet know it, but the night was only beginning. The pressure on the mattress did not ease, it deepened. It pressed into the frame with a deliberate slowness, like someone settling in, adjusting their weight, testing the space. I wanted to call out to Jacob, to shake him awake, to scoop him in my arms and run from the room, from the house, from the memory of what I was feeling, but something held me still. It wasn't fear, not at first. It was certainty. A horrifying recognition that something intelligent shared that room, and it knew I was finally aware of it. My mouth went dry. My fingers twitched at my sides, useless and trembling. I leaned forward slightly, peering toward the foot of the bed. The indentation was unmistakable, an unmistakably human shape, the exact curvature a body would make when sitting. A man. Exactly where Jacob had said. A wave of dread crawled up my spine. "Who's there?" I whispered, impossibly soft, frightened even of my own voice. The room did not reply with sound. It replied with cold. A sudden plunge in temperature, sharp as winter air rushing through an open door. I exhaled, and I swear I saw my breath become a pale cloud floating before my face. The nightlight flickered, its glow sputtering like a candle pressed too close to a mouth whispering secrets. Jacob whimpered beside me. Not awake. Not fully asleep. Caught somewhere in the middle, struggling against something his dreams or the dark or the presence on the bed was showing him. Then, from the darkness beyond the foot of the bed, came the faintest creak. Wood. Floorboard. Weight shifting. The thing wasn't just sitting anymore. It was turning. Facing us. My lungs refused to expand. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs like a fist trying to escape. I felt watched, terrifyingly, intimately watched. As though a face hovered inches from mine despite the physical distance between us. "Dad," Jacob murmured, still half dreaming. "Don't look at his eyes." His words sliced through me. "What eyes, Jacob?" I breathed, but he didn't answer. Another creak. Another shift of weight. I could feel it staring. I could feel its attention travel over me the way static travels across skin before lightning strikes. The sensation was so strong I nearly reached out, thinking irrationally I could touch what wasn't visible, like running a hand through fog thick enough to push back. A faint whisper drifted through the room. Too low to understand. Too close to ignore. It sounded like syllables strung together by someone who hadn't used words in decades. My pulse hammered in my ears as I leaned closer, trying to discern the noise, and suddenly, the figure stood. Not visually. Not with sound. With weight. With displacement. With the groaning of old floorboards beneath an unseen body rising to its full height. The mattress sprang back into place so sharply it jolted Jacob awake. He shot upright, eyes wide in absolute terror, not confusion, not sleepiness. Recognition. "He's not supposed to stand," Jacob whispered. My blood turned to ice. The air thickened, humming with pressure, as though the entire room inhaled in anticipation. I wrapped an arm around my son instinctively, pulling him against me. His tiny fingers clutched my shirt with a desperation that cut me deeper than any fear I'd felt so far. "Where is he?" I asked, voice shaking. "Jacob, where?" Jacob lifted a trembling hand and pointed to the darkest corner of the room, where the nightlight's glow refused to reach. "There," he whispered. "He's watching you now." I stared into that darkness. Something stared back. I didn't see it. Not truly. But I felt its gaze, heavy and ancient and unwelcoming. My breath shallowed. My thoughts tangled. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But then came a whisper, clear this time, deliberate, spoken by a voice impossibly close to my ear, "You shouldn't have stayed." I jerked away, clutching Jacob, stumbling off the bed. The door slammed shut by itself with a violent force that rattled the frame. The nightlight burst, plunging us into darkness so absolute it felt physical. Jacob screamed. And in the blackness, footsteps approached. Slow. Measured. Coming straight toward us. Darkness swallowed us whole. I held Jacob so tightly I could feel his heartbeat hammering against my chest, a frantic rhythm that matched my own. The footsteps, those slow, unhurried steps, closed the distance between the unseen presence and us with a dreadful deliberateness, like a predator enjoying the fear of its prey before the strike. "Don't move," Jacob whispered into my shirt. His voice trembled, but the words were intentional, as if repeating something he'd been told many times before. The footsteps halted. Right in front of us. I could almost feel the air displacement of someone towering over me, someone close enough that if he had breath, it would have brushed my forehead. I stared into the pitch-black space before me, and though I saw nothing, a force pressed against my awareness, heavy and ancient. The voice returned. Low. Ragged. Like wind scraping through an abandoned house. "He said you would come." My throat closed. I couldn't form words. Couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. But Jacob did. In a small voice that did not sound like my little boy, not childish, not innocent, but resigned, he answered the darkness, "I'm sorry." I tried to tell him. It was as though every muscle in my body turned to stone. "Jacob," I whispered, "tell me what's going on." He did not look at me. He looked straight ahead, straight at the thing I still couldn't see. "He sits on my bed because he's waiting for you," Jacob said. "He said you belonged here too." Cold sweat slicked my palms. My entire body shook. "And what does that mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. Jacob's small hand tightened on my sleeve. "He said the house chose you." The darkness shifted, not visually, but perceptibly, like a shadow leaning closer, bringing with it a scent of damp earth and something older, something rotten. A faint touch brushed my cheek, cold fingers, or the memory of fingers, and I flinched back violently. "Stop!" I shouted. "Stay away from my son." Silence fell. Then the presence stepped backward. One step. Another. Another. As though retreating into the corner where it had first lurked. The lights flickered overhead, briefly, weakly, showing us nothing but walls, furniture, toys, ordinary shapes in an ordinary room. The door creaked open behind us on its own. I didn't wait. I grabbed Jacob, scooped him into my arms, and ran. Down the hallway. Down the stairs. Through the living room. I didn't stop to grab shoes, wallets, keys, nothing. I held my son and bolted out the front door into the night. The air outside felt alive, warm, safe, real. I collapsed on the front lawn, Jacob clinging to me as he sobbed quietly into my shoulder. The house loomed behind us, dark and still. Watching. I didn't sleep that night. I sat under the streetlight, Jacob curled against me, until Emily returned from her shift just before dawn. She thought we were insane until she looked up at the second-floor window, the one to Jacob's room. Someone was standing there. A silhouette. Tall. Perfectly still. Head tilted. Watching us. Emily screamed. And as she did, the silhouette retreated backwards into the dark, dissolving as though it had never been there at all. We left that morning. We didn't pack. Didn't sell the house. Didn't go back. Sometimes, late at night, Jacob still wakes up and asks whether the man followed us to the new place. I tell him no. I tell him we're safe now. But sometimes, when I pass by his room, I feel a pressure on the foot of his bed. A weight. A presence. Waiting. And I know, as surely as I know my own name, that the man from the old house is not gone. He has simply learned patience. And he knows I stayed once. He's waiting for me to stay again.